Some medications that were originally designed to treat a disease, Alzheimer's, clinical depression, narcolepsy, are now being used by perfectly healthy people to enhance themselves, their cognition, their mood, their ability to go without sleep. What should we think of this? Well, to some, it's deeply troubling. In this sequence, we're going to take a closer look. There are actually a cluster of different issues we'll want to separate, all of which will help us to think more deeply about enhancement and hear about the role of medicine in society. Well, the very first concern is safety. The examples I've just given are ones that are called off-label uses of a medicine. So perfectly legal, what it means is that the drug wasn't tested for this type of use. It's a reasonable worry. For instance, cognitive enhancements developed to treat Alzheimer's may not carry data on long-term use. What happens if you start using them at age 20 instead of age 80? And drugs that can carry side effects warranted for treating a debilitating illness might not be warranted just to boost your already high level of functioning. Still, this worry only goes so far. Many enhancement medicines are ones that are very well studied, robust, reassuring data of safety, low side effects, and many may be safer than over-the-counter enhancements like taking wild amounts of caffeine. More deeply, at the end of the day, if this is the central concern we have, the answer isn't to object to these uses of medicine, but to conduct good clinical trials on them, as they've begun to do for many. A second issue is a deeper one, not about safety, but about the purpose of medicine. So many will say that the telos, the purpose or end at which medicine aims, should be about treatment, not enhancement. Better put, since some methods in medicine do work by enhancing a capacity. Remember, the body's ability to fight infection or absorb certain nutrients. The claim is that medicine's efforts, whatever its methods, should be aimed at battling illness and dysfunction, not making healthy people better than well. But the issue isn't as straightforward as it might sound, in part because it gets at interesting issues about just what counts as a disease or disorder in the first place. For one thing, what's dysfunctional is partly a matter of context. It's perfectly normal to be punchy after being up for 30 hours straight. Someone who experiences that isn't ill, they're exhausted. But normal or not, it can be very dangerous for people whose jobs require them to be up for very long hours. Pilots, emergency room doctors, soldiers out on long overnight forays need to keep their wits about them. If we can do something about this, keep them alert even while sleep deprived, as we can now with medicines first developed for narcolepsy, lives will be saved. Matters are yet more complex when we turn to what are called medical disorders. So medical disorders are distinct from diseases like diabetes, where a normal function of the human body breaks down. Here, a pancreas producing insulin. In contrast, we call something a disorder when someone is functioning on the low end of the distribution curve, well below the average for a typical human. Someone who functions below a typical person, otherwise perfectly healthy, if it interferes with their well-being, we'll call it a disorder and it becomes a candidate for treatment. Now, for functions like focus that are distributed on a bell curve, it makes sense we'd want to offer help to those in the lower tail before helping anyone else. But notice it doesn't mean that those in the middle of the distribution curve or even the high tail might not also benefit, potentially strongly, especially if it's something we humans aren't very good at to begin with. So here's one of my favorite examples. Take decision-making under stress. Have you ever had the experience after a really hard day when you feel incapable of making even one more decision? Someone asks if you'd like water or tea for dinner, you just stare at them. Well, it's called decisional fatigue, and it's real. The ability to reach decisions is supported by certain neurotransmitters, and some people naturally produce more than others. Well, a drug that boosted decisional stamina could help everyone out, lessening the chance that they would make a bad business or relationship decision or avoid important but tough decisions. All of us might be better if our respective levels of decisional stamina increased by 5%. Certainly might benefit more as compared to a treatment for a mild but official disease, say getting antibiotics for a slightly irritating skin infection that would have cleared up on its own anyway. In short, traditional understandings of disease and disorder are sometimes poor proxies for determining what actually most improves well-being. Well, let's turn to a different issue then. In some ways, far more interesting are concerns not about some inherent telos of medicine, but about the potential social downsides of medical enhancements. First, the profoundly important question of who will have access to them, especially for capacities that are highly socially valued, like cognition. Medical enhancements can threaten to increase the already concerning gap between the haves and the have-nots. And once we have the ability to treat something to make it better, it can be a short step to categorizing that condition now as a disease or disorder. What before were perfectly acceptable levels of attentional focus or decisional stamina now becomes a pathology, something we need to fix, what some in the medical humanities call disease creep. And do such enhancements unintentionally increase exploitation? One of the groups most using bootlegged alertness medicines are workers in sweatshop factories, trying not to get fired from unconscionably long hours. More broadly, do enhancements reinforce a pressure to be perfect? Sometimes the more we improve, the more others' expectations and standards increase, a kind of improvement treadmill. These are issues, note, that aren't just solved by increasing access. Indeed, expanding access can make them worse. Now, none of these issues is unique to medical enhancements. Any enhancement, whether medical or cultural or technological, can implicate these issues. Yet many are worth pursuing. Think of education, itself one of the most powerful cognitive enhancements that we have. Instead, what it means is that we need to be thoughtful. We need to think about whether a given enhancement in a given cultural and economic context opens up more possibilities, opportunities, and goods that it threatens to foreclose, and whether the very real benefits that could come to some individuals, better decision-making, fewer injuries, ends up constraining the welfare of others.